Hello everybody and welcome back to round 4, day 2 of Polaris and what could be another 2-0 potentially. We talked it up so much about being a 3-mapper just for the first game to go 13-2. I feel as if, you know, someone must have seen me on the Beacon broadcast and go, wait, this guy, we've got a 3-mapper problem. Let's bring on the 2-0 guy, and here I am, I suppose.
Well, here we go, headed off back to Pearl. I think this is going to be really the big one for me because we've seen human tripwires on this map a total of 0 times. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what composition they decide to run out with. And I, for one, cannot wait to see whether it's going to be Phoenix. Because I was saying this to you, it may be petty, it may be strategic, even if you haven't been practicing the Phoenix per se on this map. After seeing how strong that Phoenix paired with the Jet was on Haven and how your opponent struggled to be able to deal with it quickly, you 100% want to field Phoenix on this map where he's arguably at his strongest in the duelist role.
Yeah, definitely. And we saw that in a few different games already that have been played on Pearl, some featuring Hookahs already even. I think the attacking half that they had, while it went 6-6 and that was an incredibly close game, they showed the positives. We also saw the counterplay from Focus. So both of these things are something which need to be interacted with. This is all if, buts and maybes. The agent select will need to be the confirmation of it. And yeah, we're going to get the pretty much same comp coming out here from Human Tripwires. The only difference being this time around, we've got Epps playing on the Fade instead.
Yeah, this is very interesting actually because it feels like they're going to try inside of HSD to counter the Phoenix by running the Cypher. They've already played Pearl, so we already have taped. They played once against Bonk where they ran Astra, KO, Sova, Killjoy, Jet, and they played once on Focus where they ran Astra, Fade, KO, Killjoy, and Jet. So no Sova. They traded out the Sova for a Fade when they ran up against Bonk and vice versa when they ran up against Focus. They've never fielded a Cypher on this particular map, and it makes sense, right? Cypher is mostly there to stop and prevent those flanks from coming on through. And Human Tripwires, the way that they ran that Jet and Phoenix, they were a flanking unit. They created a lot of the space, but a lot of the time they were just 2 players in a bubble and everyone else was on a different iteration of the map. So if the Cypher can use those trapwires to keep those 2 players in check, HSD may have a much better time on Pearl against the Phoenix than they had on the last map.
I think one of those comparative differences between the two teams being the Cypher and the Killjoy is interesting, and how that already panned out in the first. Fredden is going to be one of those players in this fight. The brawl ensuing outside of B Club. And it's party time if you're HTW right now. Human Tripwires feeling good about themselves. I failed to mention this up until this point in time, but speaking of parties, it is actually Devo's birthday today, so happy birthday to Devo. We'll perhaps find a technical pause or something to sing to him, and maybe he'll greet us in an interview, but only if he wins. It's looking good for them so far. Not too much really required from Human Tripwires right now because the spike is sat in their position. HSDIRR need to carve out an opportunity because they're in the dumps, and Lynxie's found the first, wants the second onto Epps, but not before he'll lose his only remaining teammate and put us in a 1 versus 3.
Yeah, and it's a 1 versus 3 that he's unfortunately not going to be able to find a single kill from. Human Tripwires right off the gates, explosive start, very aggressive, taking full control, denying HSD to be able to really use club and push on to be long from that specific angle, but also denying the ulti for this team, allowing Human Tripwires to have all of that early round control that then tunnels into the last part of the round control because the numbers are stacked up against HSD. And this is something that we saw Hookah struggle with when they ran that Phoenix. The defense was a lot harder to pull off, but Human Tripwires have shown that those defenses can be just as controlling for a Phoenix if you start off the correct way.
We know that they'll have to feed into the aggression. You're not only running duelists in the form of the Phoenix, but double duelists from your defense as Eccles fires one between the legs of the turret there onto Lear. A nice Panenka shot. And just like that, it's the player advantage that they needed. The orb will have been scooped up, but no real use for that at this point in time.
That's such a cheeky peek coming through from Eccles, because not only do you get the turret alerting you for when HSDIRR are pushing forward, the turret is also going to absorb so much damage coming your way. Meanwhile, you're safe to just shoot away at any members of HSD. You can see Ali is already pretty darn low. He's only on 18 health, and as a result, they're really having to commit a lot of utility. They have been able to checklist Polvy's position, and the Phoenix will be suppressed, but they're still so reluctant to actually push on him, even when he doesn't have that utility. They've waited too long. Now they just have to allow the Phoenix to keep that position, and instead leave Vicious there to see if he moves.
Yeah, fortunately for Polvy, Epps will be holding the alley position. They've got a numbers advantage, and that's something which will always favour the defender's side a little bit more than the attack. When you need to fall back into those crossfires, and they have them set up. The nano swarms are for backside. Freden's just walked straight into the mouth of the beast, and Eccles is here to clean things up. Simplistic stuff in the end, and Vicious would be good for one. Curveball coming through though, flashed out, blinded, dead, and it's Eccles actually to claim his 4th. Bringing Human Tripwires now onto the second round, of which we expect.
Yeah, again, you can see the confidence from Human Tripwires. The Bulldog brought up a Vandal on the side of Epps as well. Like, they know every single time I see it. I'm going to feel like every single time I queue into either unranked or ranked, there's going to be someone now hiding behind a Killjoy turret, using it as a body shield.
We've seen this a few times now. I think between the legs, that variation, I will be happy to coin the Panenka peak, like a nutmeg in football. But, you know, that's just the footballer side of me, I suppose, coming out. I know some of the people actually, you know, within the server have their allegiances and whatnot. Devo actually supports the team, which I'm not a big fan of. So, you know, shout out that guy. Fair enough, honestly. But he's the one in the server, and I'm the one talking about him. So, levels.
Well, thankfully, I know a lot more about Valorant than I do football and offside rules.
Yes.
So we're getting to see an absolute masterclass from Human Tripwires.
No.
I say that, but Freden is actually going to be able to come in with that first kill onto Devo. And it has actually allowed HSD the distraction necessary to be able to push their way onto that A site, and now they can start to work towards clearing some of those deeper angles for the defense. Sunny's anticipating it. They know they didn't have control of Secret. They're still going to be taken down. And it is going to be those Vandals into the pistols that have just a little bit better luck at that distance fight. Blazewall coming on through, cutting off any information they just did to play around with, but they're still coming in with the kills.
Coming in with all of them, every single player finding one for themselves, and HSDIRR play as a team, and they get the ball over the line. I'm not done with it just yet.
Oh, no.
I'm not done with it just yet. But look, perhaps that's the way to play it. I think the Apex coach actually had a UEFA Pro license as well. So you know,
you
all
do
these
your
things.
football references. I'll stick with my Yu-Gi-Oh and my Dragon Ball Z, and if I have to do sports, I'll veer into badminton.
I used to play badminton actually. It's you know, it's good for exercise, plenty of cardio. But yeah, you know, football's where the heart is. Anyway, looking at this one now, it is a game of Valorant, and you know, that's even deeper into my heart if I'm being honest. We've got a full buy, and that's also something that I love to see. Gets the heart beating, pulsing away, because we're gonna get the best look at what both of these teams want to try and bring. And Devo on the operator is the end of the barrel that gets spotted, and then Ale is able to convert that kill. So a big pick for HSDIRR to open things up.
It's always unfortunate. Tour de force and operators, like, their worst enemy, other than just moving and having to reposition, is definitely how long those gun barrels are, because if you're not really quick when you cross those corners, you do get spotted out, and you will be taken down. And without that operator, that is what Human Tripwires on that defense were really hinging. That defense and slowing down HSDIRR's approach, most crucially cutting off any thought towards pushing towards B. Drone gonna be coming on through, clearing the angle for Vicious, just wanted to get a little bit of intel. Eccles takes the opportunity of downtime to drop the Nebula and hide himself away into holes as those pulses start to come on through. There's the Hunter's Fury, and it has allowed HSDIRR to move on towards tower control, and Lair drops straight onto Eccles' head and takes the Astra down.
The secret agent peak dropping in from the higher level. Trade is found eventually, and now there's a little more control for Human Tripwires towards spawn side, but they just don't have the player numbers to compete. The utility comes out from Vicious, and it's a pinned arrow straight to the chest of Stanley, and Elliot one to the head of Epps. 2 apiece. Now, finally, we see the scoreline leveled up, and HSDIRR have responded brilliantly to what Human Tripwires were doing early on. That initial aggression read like a book, like you said, a Sunday bestseller. There perhaps isn't so much to go off in terms of how Human Tripwires want to play this, but when you see 2 duelists lining up on the spreadsheet before the game starts, or on the team sheet, whatever, you're going to have that anticipation of what they want to do to really bring that success, and we have already seen it.
Well, a movement away from the Sunday Times specialized. It's unfortunately going to be a rifle through the bargain bin magazines for Human Tripwires buy, but it's still going to find Valley. The Stinger is able to catch out Lear. They're unfortunately not able to move forward and trade up that upgrade of a weapon. HSDIRR moving very quickly to counter that particular train of thought from Polvi, and the Phoenix is pushed back, still holding on to the Stinger, but a message has been sent. Human Tripwires may be behind in buys, but they're definitely not lacking in terms of prowess.
Now you have the curious question of what HSDIRR decide to do here, because they've lost a player, so that's a rifle down on the ground, and an A execute, which they know most likely there'll still be players in position here. Buying their time more than anything is to try and get a rotate to come through, and, well, yeah, also to stop that weapon from being picked up and brought into this retake, as some of the positions have already been spotted out. Fredden has advanced himself towards the back of the site and then claims both. Lovely gravity well, and also Polvi will throw the run it back in. Fancied his chances on the round, but now that will go to waste for any further involvement. Devo only with a classic. Fredden 1 point of health. But just about gets away with it, has Vicious do the dirty work for him, and HSDIRR begin to roll up their sleeves and roll away with the rounds.
Yeah, able to catch out onto those members of Human Tripwires. They know that those defenders are going to want to stick towards that A side because the weapon is straight behind HSDIRR, so they have to hold that ground, and it actually really serves to keep Human Tripwires into position so that HSDIRR can start to flank around and catch onto those members hitting behind board. You get to see it hit. Right behind Shed. Fredden's able to cross and catch 2.
And, I mean, from that point, it was just systematic. All of the remaining angles cleared out. Nice utility in towards A main early on. Seems as if HSDIRR, perhaps, I definitely saw Lear in chat for that previous series, has been reading into what Hookahs were doing and keeping that control over these orbs, so that at the very least, Human Tripwires from their defensive side aren't building up a run it back of their own incredibly quickly.
Well, we talked about it in the interview after that series as well, where there are cracks in this Phoenix composition. There are only so many bags of tricks that you can pull from. There's Null Command is going to be one trick that HSDIRR are using. It will be able to catch Stanley out. Nightfall comes on through from Human Tripwires. Isn't going to deny that spike plant, however, as even without the intel, HSDIRR are still able to look straight into the faces of Human Tripwires. And you don't need sound cues to be able to land those shots.
No, they get absolutely clattered in the end, and the null command is actually pretty huge off the back of the Nightfall, because it then means that you can't make use of the Prowlers from those terror trails, and it suddenly becomes a cobweb of information at which you're not really having the opportunity to do much with. And just like that, Human Tripwires now find themselves 2 down and actually bring out the first time out of this map. It was not them last time around, it was HSDIRR, and it was probably the last time out that they ever called, because that one was over in a flash. But I said before, you cannot count them out onto this second one, which is obviously their pick. And yeah, they're looking a lot better.
It definitely feels like you said that they were watching that previous matchup between Focus and Hookah, so that they could see that Phoenix composition interaction. It is a little bit later on in the split as well. A couple of teams have floated that Phoenix around on this particular map, so it's a little bit easier. There's a little bit more tape for you to be able to rifle through and figure out how you want to counter-strat a Phoenix on this particular iteration. And I'm definitely going to be interested to see whether it impacts how they defend, whether or not they give a little bit of a wider berth towards somewhere like B Hall, knowing how aggressive that we got to saw Mushu being with those blaze walls and pushing in with the curveballs into the back of hall, taking advantage of the defenders remaining within the walls.
We're seeing here HSDIRR, in response to all of that A main presence they previously had, go for the complete polar opposite and send it as fastly down B as you could possibly do. And just like that, Stanley's locked out of his own sight without a key. The only thing in hand is a stinger, and if you go knocking on the door with that at a close range, it can cause some issues. But Lear has another polar opposite in the form of this operator, which could be getting some action fairly soon, as we are seeing players move in from long. And actually, Polvi will clear the head right off, as Lear was unaware of it. Freden's turn now to get a use of it, and just one single warning shot from it that connects will actually keep these human Tripwires players worried to then recontest. The heat of the hot hands from Polvi finds one more to Freden, but can't quite claim the isolated duel onto Vicious, and HSDIRR get away with it. It was a bit ballsy, but it worked.
I mean, speaking of something that worked, Freden picking up that operator, getting one shot off, one kill, and then discarding it to pick up the rifle again. Like you said, it is literally just a dissuading shot. It picks up a kill, it forces human Tripwires into backing on out and buys HSDIRR that time to be able to reposition, clip through those reload ammos so that they're able to come right back in with the rifles and keep human Tripwires at an arm's length continuously, allowing them to win that round. That little bubble where they have a time of recovery when Lear drops is absolutely monumental for them to be able to recover in terms of that retake. Because now we see human Tripwires decide, okay, aggression worked the first time, now we're just going to push straight back in, and it works, but only to a point, because they're still losing bodies, they're still losing guns. And unfortunately for them, because HSDIRR were able to put so many rounds together in such a short amount of time, their economy is really going to feel it, even if they win this next round.
Yeah, Lear's positioning on the previous round, up and aggressive, as he was this time, likes to be in the bustle, in the mix, so does Polvi, but with possession of the spike and teammates not quite arriving just yet, he's done some decent work to, use that run it back and clear things out, but now there will be that awareness that they're up close, and Eccles just punches through the cage, finds Fred, and there's Vicious. Should be the second for him, and it is in the end. An operator for human Tripwires to now work with as well, and perhaps we'll see another opportunity at getting Devo to make it work, because he only had one chance, and it was that really awkward angle in A main.
It's really awkward when you're trying to op into a composition that HSDIRR are running. It's not the Viper, which is probably the most frustrating thing for a Jet to try and op into, but the KO, the Astra, the Cypher, the Sova. Sova can give away your position. KO can also give away your position, but he can suppress you so that you can't even dash out to safety when you get found out. The Astra with the Nebulas, the fact that Lear can hunt you down. It's really hard to find that space and safety to push into an angle on the defense, but Devo's able to find it. Lear is dropped. The Jet removed for HSDIRR, and human Tripwires get a little bit longer to be able to figure out whether or not they want to reposition and try and meet HSDIRR as they rotate towards mid.
Yeah, we see your point in practice. Polvi posts up and uses that flash to create the space and the utility so that Devo can get the angle that he wants, and just like that, they have the first kill in the round. Now HSDIRR need to respond, and it's not something they would have expected to be running into both duelists together. They've done it before, but with the operator in play, not the precedent that has been placed, at least by human Tripwires so far, and this is a good adaptation for the defensive side, which, as we said, they need to be pinning a decent result on, then coming into the flip side, where they should be expected to do a lot more work. This is a fairly early Cosmic Divide from Eccles here, but actually the coverage across the map as a whole is pretty good. Epps will use the Prowler to clear out B long. It's just a matter of time before HSDIRR look to hit this site. There is a lot of players waiting, though. The
problem is it's very close to the entrance of site. They are going to have to walk through and into the operator if they want to actually plant that spike.
Here comes the Hunter's Fury to make things a little easier. Polvi tucked to the corner, but instead sends the HSDIRR players to the wall. And this may just be a fourth. I think it will. Nothing more going on this execute. HSDIRR didn't really look to play the map too much. They went for that A main control, lost out a player from a nice setup that Devo was able to use on the operator, and then, yeah, just lacked presence elsewhere to lean that stack into believing it was anything different than what they set up in the beginning of the round. And now that's 2 in a row for Human Tripwires from their timeout. We see a timeout of HSDIRR come out themselves.
Yeah, they tried to claw that round back. They didn't know, because of the Cosmic Divide coming through from Eccles, where Human Tripwires would be planted. They knew that the Operator is going to be around there. And they try and use the Hunter's Fury to be able to buy themselves the just panic time to push onto site and get that spike planted, but it is not to be. And honestly, I would rather have seen that ultimate being kept in the pocket. You know that Devo is still going to be holding onto this Operator, and now you don't have the Hunter's Fury to try and brute force it away. You're going to have to drop that Cosmic Divide just to get onto one of these sites safely if you're too scared about the Operator in the early part of play.
And they do have quite the breadth of util to navigate those angles. You've got Vicious's Owl Drone, the Spy Cam, everything that Ale wants to try and work with that 0 point from range, you know, at least identifying which players are taking up certain areas. I think more than anything, it's the setup from Human Tripwires there, just to invest so much utility in one area. You then don't expect the strongest weapon in their hands to be backing that up additionally. So it's a nice adjustment, and that they've moved back off it. They've gone towards B, but HSDIRR are going to retry this A take, and I think it's actually within their best interest to do so, at least to get there early on and keep that presence for themselves, as Fredden will be lurking towards B with his cages.
Yeah, but you can see Stanley is 1 point away from getting that lockdown, and with that lockdown, Human Tripwires sort of get a peace of mind. They don't have to fully play for retake, but they need to actually have their Killjoy in pieces if they want to be able to drop the ultimate. And things are rapidly turning in the tide of HSDIRR's favor now that that kill has come on through. And they know this is their round to be able to turn things in. There's the Cosmic Divide blanketing out any impact from the Operator. Spike's going to have all of the time in the world to be able to get planted onto that A site. And Devo is going to be split from the team with very little coverage and utility to be there on the side of Polvi when he decides to actually cross onto one of these angles.
Polvi keeping art control here has been pivotal in how Human Tripwires now look to try and approach the retake. Lynxie using up all of those Astral Stars now has to involve themselves with the gunplay, but it's Eps that will win out. And suddenly this is looking a lot worse of a situation for HSDIRR. Player numbers as Devo looks to start sticking out that spike. Flash to the corner is Vicious. They've not won any of the duels. Devo to find the first. The spike is halved. He'll go for the stick. Peeks out through the Neural Theft. That's a confirmation. This will expire before there is time, and the shot not even there to give him half a chance. HSDIRR clamber over the line.
It's close. It's a lot closer than HSDIRR are wanting. And unfortunately for them, Human Tripwires may still decide to try and buy up into this Operator in this next round. They've seen how good it can be now that there isn't a Cosmic Divide to deal with as well. The big difference for HSDIRR is the fact that they take the Killjoy, that Stanley is taken out of the equation before the push comes through properly. If a lockdown had been added to the chaotic jumble of a recontest that HSDIRR are forced into dealing with, the Phoenix from Art, the Jet that they're worrying about from Secret, that lockdown would just have not allowed them to be able to win the retake. As again, we see Human Tripwires get aggressive, but HSDIRR this time are ready.
Yeah, I mean, a very coordinated swing back from top mid to find those kills, and then Fredden will add an additional feather to the cap. That is now an advantage for them in terms of player numbers. There's trips to hold both ends of the flank, so Eccles' involvement here won't be too much other than just watching. There isn't a rotating... What? Words begin to fail me. Stanley somehow just picks off 2 who line up. Yeah, you can coordinate the peak, but... you know, when you're basically walking inside one another, there's always the chance that you invite that. And Fredden's on 1 HP again.
How many times today have we seen players just not quite coordinate the angle that they're going to peek in? It is so costly. Oh, so costly. Fredden on 1 HP has to book it over towards B. At least has the time to be able to get the spike planted. But a puff of wind in this Cypher's location, even his nearby vicinity, is all Human Tripwires need to be able to win this round.
Eccles and Stanley moving together. We'll be hearing all of this sound, Fredden playing from CT. It's the Killjoy lockdown, which will make things even more difficult, but I believe he can just post up on the angle and still have vision of the spike. No, actually it is so deep that he'll have to fight with his very life, and that's exactly what will happen. A full stick here for Eccles, perhaps one of the best situations that Fredden could actually have for himself, because it's denied the fight on the player with 1 point of health and brought it just about over the line.
Oh my goodness. They didn't chase the kill. The lockdown gets invested. They think, okay, this is gonna spook the Cypher out of location. One goes to hunt, the other stays on the stick. And they don't chase after Fredden. And Fredden's able to find the angle onto the Killjoy, and then gets the wall bang onto the Astra.
Yeah, it's crazy from Stanley to bring it to that position as a whole, I think, if you look at how the round played out. But then, yeah, like you mentioned, there's no follow-up, and Fredden to take that first pick on towards Stanley, I believe it was, before it even got to that situation, was absolutely huge. And Lear will discard the knives in trade for Eccles' life, open up the B site with another fast hit first of the neural theft. It confirms the position. Devo gets 2. Fredden's gone towards spawn this time, and we'll have to wait in spawn until the next half because he's been deleted on this instance. 3 versus 3, and there's much better control of the site here for Human Tripwires this time around, but that null command will cause some issues in towards this retake. Absolutely zero cover for these players to work with on that spike, and HSDIRR can poke out as they like. Lynxy plays a game of whack-a-mole and pokes out his own head to take off their opponents. HSDIRR 8-4 on the half. Human Tripwires not able to replicate their early success.
Okay, now we get to see whether or not Human Tripwires are going to read from the textbook of Hookahs and go for that super aggressive push onto B. Very aggressive, very fast. Just trying to jump onto the defenders hidden up in hall, so they can get that spike down and they can retreat all the way back with all of that wonderful coverage and bait the defenders into peeking out from tower and dropping onto the low ground and into your crosshairs to force the defuse. But from the way that they're positioned, nope, it's going to be A.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems to be that way, right? We still are yet to see whether there's late round development there, if it is going for the orb early like we saw from Hookahs, if they are taking their word as gospel in that sense, as we have now reached a technical pause. So unfortunately, yeah, it was a while before we reached one, but we finally hit our first bump in the road. Hopefully it won't be too long. I guess that would be the time to sing Devo happy birthday if you wanted to. That'll definitely...
Nobody wants to hear me attempt
I was going to say, look, if it happens, it'll definitely end up on Twitter, and then I would feel bad, because I mentioned it earlier, I felt bad. Hashtag free Tombiz. I know he's watching. Make sure you get that trending. Let's get the man back on the airwaves. But yeah, the way that this game has played out so far, it has to be said, HSDIRR really impressive in how they've been able to turn this one around. And while Human Tripwires are running double duelists, of course, and you expect their attack to be better, the comp that we're seeing from HSDIRR is so consistent across the board. And when you speak of the utility that they're going to have available to them now on this defensive half, I, in many ways, fancy that Cypher over the Killjoy.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about, right? The Cypher has so much value on that defense in shutting down these angles, especially given the buffs that he just received, where all of your utility is just so much wider and so much more reaching than it was before. And we thought, okay, maybe the Cypher is going to struggle on the attacking side, but apparently not. Fredden's been able to really push quite aggressively, partly down to some really nifty Cypher cages just to be able to clear up a lot of space for HSDIRR to be able to move on forward. I'll be honest, I'm still recovering from that round where he wins with 1 health left. That shouldn't have happened. But again, it really does come down to him being able to set up a lot in terms of support utility. And I think if they're really able to buoy Lear to use those Cypher utilities and information that the camera picks up on Polvi and Devo's location for this jet to really push aggressively forward and look for that first kill, this is a team that's going to have a very stalwart defense.
Finally, we do get into the second half, the pistol round. spared the possibility of hearing my dulcet tones over any kind of... I swear Happy Birthday is actually copyrighted, so...
I think it is, so you get 5 seconds.
I would be in breach of contract if I was to even attempt it, so not going to happen. Either way, right now, Human Tripwires breaching into the depths of art, as already they're looking to crunch in this site from both sides. Alec takes one and dips away. Fredden still holding firm on the site, has the Tripwires to take out the Tripwires, and just like that, Lynxy will claim 2 off the back of it as well. Epps, you're not winning that one, my boy. That's 3 now for the Astra player on the spot. And HSDIRR take the pistol. This is brilliant stuff for them because now you're looking at double digits and only 3 gun rounds that they need to win when you want to just bring it to that 3rd and final map. So look, maybe I'm not cursed after all. And in saying that, this one's gonna flip on its head.
Look, I mean, I don't believe in curses. I do believe in Fredden. Fredden's utility in that round, the cages to distort those teams' positions was just absolutely perfect. Human Tripwires were firing blind. And as a result, HSA gets so much control of the A site as they try and enter in. And when you're running that Phoenix and the Jet, you need entrance to be explosive and immediate impact. If you don't find that immediate impact, you're not going to find the value or your full team surviving. And again, it's a Cypher assist that comes in to help the first down.
Oh my goodness, vicious. Some movement diff on the Frenzy and Spectre. Perfect combination made in hell almost. And yeah, this matchup where we said coming in, Human Tripwires, it was sort of a blind date as to what we expect out of them. And yeah, this combination from Vicious has cleaned them up in the alley, swept them off their feet, but in a different regard.
It's really interesting as well that this is really the first time we're seeing HSDIRR running that Cypher on this map, and it feels like Human Tripwires weren't expecting to run into it. Because the way that they're positioned, the way that they're playing early on in these rounds is not how you would expect a team to traditionally play into a defensive Cypher. They are very unsure of where this utility is potentially going to be, and they don't want to blindly shoot at walls in case it gives that position away. Look at this camera. Look at all of the information that it's getting. No one on Human Tripwires is any the wiser that they've all been picked out.
Similar to one that we saw Magnum use on this map before, and right now the execute just starting to come to life. This one somewhat similar to that of HSDIRR, but you've got Tripwires to worry about this time. Polby gets completely enveloped by it in the end. That will be his undoing. Ale finds one from range onto Stanley as well, and look at this. Liz in the back line. Those are 2 players to be taking out. Fredden spares him the chance at doubling up, but HSDIRR look to be running away with this now after converting that bonus.
Yeah, it's the push that Hookhouse tried to make work, and it was the push that they were able to make work so well because it was unexpected in their timing. When they tried to rush onto the Sova, they were able to catch him in the middle of using his utility because he didn't know when that Phoenix was going to swing. But the Cypher with the camera knows exactly when you're making that move and is ready and waiting, barrel pointed at the corner for a Phoenix to just try and dare cross into your crosshairs. And as a result, HSDIRR are able to absolutely snuff the flames of Human Tripwires push onto B in a matter of moments.
The Spectre's doing decent work there as well. I mean, it was in the last patch that they changed the damage at range from like 20 to 15, I believe, so nowhere near as strong as it used to, and those numbers do add up, but still, it's the setup from HSDIRR as well. You got the Tripwires in place, like Fredden can play off the back of those so nicely. Doesn't matter if it's going to take you a little bit longer to chew apart the player caught inside it, as long as you have sightline and they don't, which was something I think that stood out to me a lot with how many smokes we saw on the site in the chaos. That's where Fredden becomes a serious asset to this team.
It is just that Cypher utility on the defense. Harder to make work on the attack, but if you have the points to play with, your defense is just so set, and Human Tripwires are really struggling because not only are they losing rounds, but because of that Cypher utility putting them at such a disadvantaged state, they're not able to trade kills. So their economy is absolutely down the drink at the moment, as we're 2 rounds away from match point, and they're still running Stingers.
And they've all walked past Lynxy. He's counting up the players as the kills keep on raking through for him. Epps gets a consolation towards main, but that feels as if all it's going to be. Vandal in hand, an opportunity to find a kill onto Vicious perhaps as he's toying with the chance of peeking through, but will mature a little in the form of this owl drone and get a ping, you would think, just shy of the head. Pre-aimed the Slender Man and didn't find Epps, but we'll go for this again. Yeah, this round just completely undone by human Tripwires. HSDIRR positioned very nicely, and I like the smoke from Lynxie as well.
Yeah, part of it definitely feels like HSDIRR, by running this Cypher, again, really unexpected pick coming out for this team. They've ran Pole twice. Human Tripwires 100% were not expecting to run into a Cypher. Epps is making it work. We'll be able to find two, but will not be able to find the round win, and HSDIRR will be able to find themselves on match point. And remember at the beginning of the series where we sort of floated the idea of that teething period is going to be a little bit stronger and harder hitting for a team that has a newer IGL. It's moments like this where you're coming into comps that you're not really sure how to deal with, that newer IGL is going to show, right? That is when it is going to be the true test. That's when the most pressure is going to be applied. And I think for human Tripwires, having this curveball thrown at them, even though it's them running the Phoenix, is their undoing on this map.
Yeah, I would say it's less about being a newer IGL in terms of experience, because we understand that Eccles, of course, has played this role several times before and delivered results on a big stage. It's more, like you said, being aware of what it is that you're working with and what you're playing against. And as a whole, this comp that they're running, maybe not as well drilled as HSDIRR, who've been around, in the entirety of the off-season, working from being Kova now into this new roster with the introduction of Lear and so on and so forth. So one round at a time. We saw that HSDIRR's defense typically is better, but there are gaps in it that Devo's been able to punish. Fredden able to bring a kill back, but bulk of the A site control has been taken from them. Oh no.
Again, it's the double Cypher cages. A Nightfall is initiated by Abs, and it's the exact same reaction from HSDIRR. Double Cypher cage to mitigate the amount of impact as much as possible, and it forces human Tripwires, despite using that Fade ultimate and picking Ally off towards the A site, towards pushing towards B.
You have this lockdown to just consolidate some space towards Hall, and Eccles actually peeks out from it. Now breaking in towards the site will be even more difficult because they've just, bided their time but not really checked out all the angles. The HSDIRR players will come back through and claim the kill that they need to bring us to that map 3. 13-4, a convincing result in the end from HSDIRR. That will sow any doubts in your mind out of the picture now, coming into the third and final one. It's anybody's game, but you have to say the momentum now has done a complete 180.
Yeah, I think we heard from Epps in that interview that he did confess that they needed to work on building that synergy still for this team, and you can definitely see, right? We know that they have the mechanical prowess, we know that they have the coordination. That first map was an absolute masterclass. They looked extremely strong together, but then we headed into Pearl and they had that unknown factor of the Cypher coming on through, and the cracks began to form. And HSDIRR saw that the Cypher was being problematic, and they took the bull by the horns. They made sure that that Cypher was in the most annoying, most frustrating, most forward positions as possible without playing like a duelist. He was always the first point of contact that human Tripwires would run into when they pushed on the attack, and that was designed that way on purpose, because Fredden was the undoing. Whenever they ran into a Trapwire, whenever they ran into a Cypher cage, all of the momentum that human Tripwires with this Phoenix and Jet working together were looking to put on the table, it was denied entirely by a Cypher just being in the lobby.
Yeah, in many ways, you can probably now, looking at the response from HSDIRR on Pearl into what we saw on Haven, put it down to just not being aware of what it was exactly that human Tripwires were going to be bringing to this game and what the playstyle looks like, because after those first few rounds that we saw here, it was a complete shift. I think HSDIRR ended up winning 7 or 8 rounds in a row to see out that map, simply based on the fact that they had an understanding of what it was exactly that human Tripwires wanted to try and do with the pieces that they had sort of set themselves up for. Now, going into that final map of Breeze, these, it's sort of anybody's guess as to how this is going to work out. We did see a little bit before teams still actually playing a chamber. I would doubt it here. Probably still leaning in more towards Stanley now picking up that Cypher for himself. But then are we going to still see it be a Jet and a Phoenix? Are they going to double down with the double duelist and see if this is what's going to work out for them? Because they've obviously cracked it, but HSDIRR have the read. Only time will tell. We'll see you guys after a break.
The Moxie Curse wins